The message arrived without warning. No alarms. No dramatic countdown. No desperate fleet fleeing through hyperspace. Just a signal. A weak, aging transmission that slipped through the outer listening arrays on the edge of human territory and quietly entered the communications network. For 17 minutes it sat unnoticed among cargo manifests, navigation updates, and routine traffic reports. Then a night shift technician named Eric Mallory opened it. At first, he thought it was corrupted data. The transmission contained no recognizable language. Only mathematical sequences, prime numbers, repeating patterns, fragments of star coordinates. Then something else. Audio. Broken. Distorted. Almost buried beneath layers of interference. Eric frowned and forwarded it to analysis. 20 minutes later the linguistics department flagged it as unusual. An hour later the signal reached military intelligence. 3 hours later half the command staff of Earth Defense Command had been dragged out of bed. Nobody understood why. Not yet. The translation process took longer than expected. Whoever had sent the message wasn't human. Their language structure was completely different. Their concepts didn't align neatly with human thought. Several sections resisted translation entirely. But one sentence appeared quickly. One sentence that froze the entire room. They have reached our skies. Silence followed. The analysts continued working. More words appeared. More meaning. More context. The room grew quieter with every minute. Finally the full message emerged. Not a declaration. Not a diplomatic greeting. Not a threat. A plea. We are the Talari. Our defense fleet is gone. Our cities are burning. They have given us one rotation to surrender. We will not surrender. If anyone hears this. The translation paused. Several analysts stared at their screens. One woman quietly removed her glasses. Nobody spoke. The final sentence appeared. If anyone hears this, please remember that we tried. The room became completely silent. Fleet Admiral Catherine Reyes read the message twice. Then a third time. Around her, senior officers exchanged uneasy glances. The Talari were unknown. Humanity had never heard of them. The coordinates attached to the signal placed them almost 160 light-years beyond the explored frontier. Far beyond trade routes. Far beyond diplomatic range. Far beyond any territory humanity could reasonably claim as its concern. One of the civilian advisors cleared his throat. We don't know who they are. Another nodded. We don't know who's attacking them. A third added quietly. We don't know if the message is genuine. All reasonable points. All intelligent observations. Admiral Reyes listened without interruption. The arguments continued. Distance. Logistics. Political consequences. Risk assessment. The possibility of a trap. The possibility of escalation. Every concern was valid. Every concern was logical. The room eventually fell silent. All eyes turned toward the Admiral. She looked at the message one final time. Then she asked a single question. How long? An intelligence officer checked the latest calculations. The signal is 9 days old. The room became even quieter. 9 days. If the Talari were still alive, they were already fighting for survival. If they had lost, then this conversation no longer mattered. The officer hesitated. There is one more thing. Reyes looked up. The officer activated another screen. Additional transmissions. Dozens of them. All originating from the same region of space. All sent over several weeks. The earlier messages were different. Less desperate. More hopeful. The first one simply announced the existence of the Talari civilization. The second requested peaceful contact. The third discussed cultural exchange. The fourth contained scientific data. The fifth was never completed. Instead, it ended abruptly halfway through transmission. That was when the attacks had started. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The realization settled over the room like a weight. The Talari had not been preparing for war. They had been preparing to meet new friends. Instead, They had met something else. Reyes stood from her chair. The movement immediately drew attention. Every conversation stopped. Every eye followed her. She walked toward the main display and stared at the final translated sentence. "If anyone hears this, please remember that we tried." A younger officer finally spoke. "What do we do?" Reyes didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about something. Not strategy. Not politics. Not logistics. History. Human history. A species that had spent thousands of years fighting over territory. Over resources. Over beliefs. A species that had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, extinctions, and disasters by refusing to disappear. A species that understood exactly what it meant to stand alone while the darkness closed in. The room waited. Finally she spoke. "If that message reached us." She paused. "If they were willing to send it into the dark." Another pause. Then they believed someone might answer. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The Admiral turned toward her officers. Her voice remained calm. Steady. Almost casual. "We have ships for this." The room exploded. Arguments appeared instantly. Protests. Warnings. Risk assessments. Political consequences. Economic concerns. Strategic concerns. Humanity had no treaty with the Talari. No alliance. No obligations. No legal reason to intervene. The debate lasted 2 hours. Admiral Reyes listened patiently. She allowed everyone to speak. She allowed every concern to be voiced. Then, when the final argument ended, she issued mobilization orders. The debate stopped immediately. Because everyone in the room understood something. The decision had already been made. Across Earth, Mars, Luna, and the orbital shipyards, encrypted orders began spreading through military networks. Ships were recalled. Crews were assembled. Weapons were loaded. Fuel depots opened. Dockyards illuminated the darkness with thousands of work lights. The largest mobilization in nearly 30 years had begun. Most citizens wouldn't learn about it until later. Most would wake the next morning completely unaware that humanity was preparing to cross 160 light-years of space. Not for conquest. Not for profit. Not for territory. For strangers. Far away, beyond explored space, the Talari continued fighting. They did not know help was coming. They did not know humanity existed. They did not know that somewhere in the darkness, an entire civilization had heard their final message, and decided that it was unacceptable. The stars above Earth remained silent. But beneath those stars, engines were awakening. Humanity had received the call. And humanity was already moving. The Dominion had ruled its corner of the galaxy for nearly 7 centuries. In all that time, nobody had ever stopped them. Entire civilizations had tried. Entire civilizations had failed. The pattern never changed. The Dominion arrived. Terms were presented. Submission was offered. Resistance was punished. The survivors learned obedience. The dead became history. After hundreds of years, the process had become so routine that most Dominion commanders viewed conquest the same way humans viewed weather. It simply happened. It was expected. It was inevitable. Supreme Commander Xerox certainly believed that. He stood on the command balcony of the battleship Iron Judgment, watching Viridia Prime burn beneath him. The Talari homeworld glowed with scattered fires. Several major cities had already been destroyed. Orbital defense stations drifted in pieces through the darkness. The Talari fleet no longer existed. The battle had ended days ago. This was merely cleanup. Xerox felt nothing while watching it. Why would he? His species had conquered 32 civilizations. The Talari were simply number 33. Another entry in a very long list. An officer approached. Reports from the surface. Xerox accepted the datapad. Any surrender? No, Commander. Xerox sighed. The Talari disappointed him. Most species surrendered eventually. Eventually fear overcame pride. Eventually survival became more important than freedom. The Talari appeared determined to die. Unfortunate. but hardly unique. Another officer stepped forward. Commander, long-range sensors have detected unusual activity. Xerox barely looked up. Talari reinforcements? No. The officer hesitated. Unknown vessels. That finally caught his attention. Unknown vessels were rare. Very rare. Most species in this region of the galaxy already belonged to the Dominion. Those that didn't usually avoided military activity. Xerox activated the sensor display. A cluster of contacts appeared. Small. Distant. Moving quickly. The officer continued. Initial estimates indicate 12 vessels. Several commanders laughed. 12. Only 12. The laughter spread across the bridge. Xerox smiled. The Dominion fleet currently consisted of 67 warships. 12 vessels represented nothing. Perhaps some local power had decided to play hero. Perhaps someone wanted to make a symbolic gesture. Either way, the outcome was obvious. The report expanded. Additional information appeared. Species designation. Human. Origin. Earth. Contact history. Limited. Known military capability. Incomplete. Xerox skimmed the file. Humanity. He vaguely remembered the name. A recently discovered species from beyond the frontier. Not especially important. Not especially powerful. Certainly not powerful enough to challenge the Dominion. He tossed the report aside. 12 ships. The bridge crew laughed again. Continue bombardment. The officers returned to work. The matter was considered resolved. Everyone moved on. Everyone except one. Sub-Commander Varek remained silent. Old by Dominion standards, Varek had spent most of his career studying military history. Not battles. Not victories. Defeats. He studied civilizations before they were conquered. He studied what made species dangerous. He studied mistakes. Most officers considered it a pointless specialty. The defeated had already lost. What possible value could there be in studying them? Varek disagreed. Because every empire eventually encountered something it didn't understand. And those moments usually ended badly. For months he had been reviewing the human file. Not because humanity seemed powerful. Because humanity seemed unusual. Very unusual. The file contained records of human wars. Thousands of them. Wars between nations. Wars between planets. Wars between alliances. Wars against pirates. Wars against terrorists. Wars against impossible odds. Humanity appeared addicted to conflict. Not because they enjoyed it. Because they refused to quit. That distinction bothered Varek. A species that enjoyed war could be predicted. A species that refused to quit could not. He requested permission to speak. Xerox granted it. Mostly because he found Varek entertaining. The old officer stepped forward. I recommend immediate withdrawal. The bridge became silent. Then several officers laughed. One actually choked on his drink. Xerox stared at him. Explain. Varek activated the human file. Images appeared across the display. Ancient battlefields. Destroyed cities. Burning warships. Historical archives. Records of conflicts stretching back thousands of years. These humans are unlike the species we usually encounter. Another officer rolled his eyes. They sent 12 ships. Varek ignored him. They enter conflicts that do not benefit them. Silence. They fight when logic suggests retreat. More silence. They continue fighting after suffering losses that would break most civilizations. The laughter had stopped. Xerox's expression darkened. Your point. Varek looked directly at him. My point, Commander, is that species do not send warships 160 light years for strangers. Nobody answered. Because it was true. No rational civilization would. Not for a species they had never met. Not for a world they had never seen. Not for people who could offer nothing in return. Varek continued. The fact that they are coming anyway concerns me. One officer scoffed. 12 ships. Varek nodded. Exactly. The officer frowned. Varek enlarged the sensor data. 12 ships arrived with only days of preparation. He looked around the room. I wonder how many would arrive if they had months. Nobody answered. Zarok finally stood. The bridge immediately became quiet. The commander walked toward Varek. Slowly, deliberately. His voice remained calm. Do you believe 12 human ships can defeat 67 Dominion warships? Varek answered immediately. No. Several officers smirked. Then Varek continued. I believe those 12 ships believe they can. The smirks disappeared. Because confidence was one thing. Belief was another. A species willing to travel 160 light years into certain death possessed something dangerous. Not strength. Not technology. Conviction. Zarok stared at him for several seconds. Then he laughed. The bridge joined him. The tension vanished. The commander returned to his station. Continue bombardment. Varek slowly sat down. He said nothing else. But he couldn't stop looking at the sensor display. The contacts were getting closer. Hour by hour. Minute by minute. Steadily advancing through the darkness. 12 ships. Only 12. And yet something felt wrong. Very wrong. Across the void, humanity continued its approach. Inside the flagship Resolute Dawn, Commodore Nathan Hale stood before the tactical display. The bridge remained calm. No speeches. No dramatic declarations. Just professionals doing their jobs. The fleet consisted of 12 vessels. 3 dreadnoughts. 4 destroyers. 2 carriers. 3 support ships. That was all. Not because humanity lacked more ships. Because those were the closest available. The rest would take weeks to arrive. Hale studied the latest intelligence report. Enemy strength. 67 warships. Heavy orbital superiority. Planetary bombardment already underway. The numbers should have been intimidating. They weren't. Not because humans were fearless. Because humans understood numbers. And numbers only mattered when people allowed them to. A young officer approached. Sir, combat simulations updated. Hale accepted the report. Results. 89% probability of victory. Hale raised an eyebrow. Only 89? The officer smiled. The tactical AI says it keeps finding new ways for us to win. Several crew members laughed. Hale looked toward the stars outside the viewport. Far ahead, beyond the darkness, an entire civilization was waiting for extinction. Waiting without hope. Waiting alone. They didn't know humanity was coming. That would change soon. A communication alert suddenly appeared. The fleet had reached the edge of the Viridian system. Every bridge officer immediately focused on their stations. Sensor feeds activated. Targeting systems awakened. Combat protocols loaded. The stars ahead slowly expanded across the tactical display. And for the first time, humanity saw the war they had crossed 160 light years to stop. Cities burned. Defense stations drifted in ruins. Orbital wreckage surrounded the planet like a graveyard. The bridge became very quiet. Hale stared at the devastation. Then he looked at the massive Dominion fleet surrounding the world. Dozens of warships. Dozens of gun platforms. Dozens of targets. The tactical AI processed everything instantly. A firing solution appeared. Then another. Then hundreds more. The silence lasted only a few seconds. Finally Hale nodded once. Open a channel. The communications officer obeyed. The signal raced toward the Dominion fleet. Every enemy ship received it. Every commander heard it. Every soldier listened. Commodore Nathan Hale's voice echoed across the battlefield. This is the Earth Expeditionary Fleet. He paused, looking directly at the burning world below. Stand down your weapons. Another pause. Leave this system. The bridge remained silent. The Dominion fleet listened. The Talari listened. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. Then Hale finished. You have 30 seconds. And far away on the bridge of the Iron Judgment, Commander Xerox smiled. Because he had already decided what his answer would be. The Dominion opened fire before the 30 seconds expired. Not because they were impatient. Not because they were afraid. Because Commander Xerox genuinely believed the battle had already been decided. The first wave of energy lances crossed the void. Hundreds of weapon signatures lit up the tactical displays. Enough firepower to erase cities. Enough firepower to shatter fleets. Enough firepower to make any sensible commander retreat. Commodore Hale watched the incoming barrage. His expression never changed. Activate Athena. The fleet AI came online. Immediately, every human ship received updated firing solutions, movement vectors, threat priorities, and contingency plans. The tactical display transformed. The battlefield stopped looking like chaos. It became mathematics. 12 ships. 67 enemies. Thousands of variables. Millions of calculations every second. The first Dominion volley reached its targets. Or rather, where its targets had been. The human fleet wasn't there anymore. 12 ships moved simultaneously. Not randomly. Not independently. As one organism. The Dominion formation hesitated. Only for a second. But in battle, a second mattered. The destroyers accelerated outward. The carriers altered position. The dreadnoughts rotated slowly. Every movement appeared disconnected. Every movement appeared chaotic. None of it was. Athena had already predicted the next 4 minutes of combat. And the next 4. And the 4 after that. Commander Xerox watched his targeting officers struggle to maintain locks. Why are they splitting apart? Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Dominion doctrine emphasized formation. Concentration. Pressure. Human doctrine emphasized something else entirely. Freedom. The destroyers vanished from the main battle line. Within seconds they appeared along the edges of the Dominion formation. Fast. Aggressive. Unpredictable. Weapons flashing. Communication relays exploded. Sensor ships vanished. Command nodes disappeared. The Dominion fleet suddenly found itself struggling to communicate. Orders arrived late. Targeting data became unreliable. Coordination began breaking down. Xerox frowned. The battle was less than 3 minutes old. Already things were becoming irritating. Then the carriers launched their drones. Hundreds of them. Thousands of lights erupted from the carrier bays. The Dominion officers stared. What are those? Nobody knew. Most species used drones for scouting, reconnaissance, support roles. Nobody built military strategies around them. Humanity did. The swarm expanded across space, splitting, reforming, accelerating, changing direction constantly. The tactical display became crowded with contacts. Too many contacts. Suddenly every Dominion ship had dozens of new threats to track. Targeting systems became overloaded. Priorities became confused. And while they struggled to identify targets, the drones arrived. The first Dominion cruiser exploded. Not from a massive weapon. Not from a dreadnought. From a drone. A single machine barely larger than a shuttle. It attached itself to the hull. Cut through armor. Detonated inside critical systems. The cruiser went dark instantly. The second ship died 30 seconds later. The third followed shortly afterward. Commander Xerox stood from his command chair. His confidence was beginning to crack. The battle no longer resembled any engagement he had ever fought. Nothing behaved correctly. Nothing followed established patterns. The humans were fighting wrong. Meanwhile, aboard the dreadnought Resolute Dawn, Commodore Hale calmly reviewed updates. Status. Enemy communications reduced by 41%. Good. Drone operations exceeding projections. Good. Destroyer wings report successful penetration. Good. Another officer looked up. Sir, enemy command vessel identified. Hale studied the display. The largest vessel in the Dominion fleet. Heavily armored. Protected by multiple escort groups. Exactly where intelligence predicted. Athena highlighted it immediately. A firing solution appeared. Then another. Then another. Hale nodded. Begin Phase 2. Across the battlefield, the human dreadnoughts finally moved. Until now they had remained almost stationary. Waiting. Calculating. Positioning. Now they advanced. Massive engines ignited. The stars themselves seemed to shift. 3 human dreadnoughts pushed directly toward the center of the Dominion formation. The Dominion commanders welcomed this. Finally, a proper battle. Something familiar. Something understandable. They redirected fire. Thousands of weapons targeted the advancing ships. Energy beams crossed the void. Missiles launched. Rail batteries fired. The darkness became a storm. And still the dreadnoughts advanced. Armor absorbed impacts. Deflection systems redirected energy. Damage reports appeared. Minor. Manageable. Insignificant. The human ships kept coming. Xerox watched in disbelief. Nothing should have survived that amount of fire. Nothing. Then the human dreadnoughts returned fire. The void erupted. Entire sections of the Dominion formation disappeared. One moment ships existed. The next moment they didn't. Not damaged. Not disabled. Gone. The battleship Vengeance of Stars ceased existing in less than 2 seconds. A heavy cruiser vanished shortly afterward. Then another. Then another. The Dominion formation finally broke. Not physically. Mentally. For centuries they had been the unstoppable force. The inevitable power. The conquerors. Now they were dying. And they didn't understand why. Panic spread. Panic always spreads faster than fire. Ships began repositioning without orders. Captains acted independently. Formations dissolved. Coordination vanished. Commander Xerox shouted commands. Nobody listened fast enough. Because communication systems were failing. Because drones were everywhere. Because destroyers were attacking from impossible angles. Because human ships refused to fight according to the rules. And because fear had entered the battlefield. Fear changes everything. Across the bridge of the Iron Judgment, alarms screamed continuously. Another report arrived. Then another. Then another. Destroyed. 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 Every update was worse. Every update carried more losses. The impossible was happening. The Dominion was losing. Subcommander Varek sat quietly near the back of the bridge. He wasn't surprised. Terrified. Yes. But not surprised. Because this was exactly what he had feared. The humans hadn't come to make a statement. They hadn't come to negotiate. They hadn't crossed 160 light years hoping for a miracle. They had come expecting victory. That realization chilled him more than the battle itself. Commander Xerox finally issued the order. Retreat. Silence swept across the bridge. Nobody could remember the last time a Dominion commander had spoken that word. Retreat. The order spread throughout the fleet. Surviving vessels immediately turned toward escape vectors. FTL drives began charging. The battle should have ended there. It didn't. Because Athena had already predicted the retreat. Human carriers shifted position. Destroyers accelerated. Dreadnoughts closed the exits. Not completely. Just enough. Just enough to transform an organized withdrawal into a disaster. The fleeing ships found themselves trapped in overlapping kill zones. Human weapons struck with terrifying precision. One after another. One after another. One after another. The Dominion fleet collapsed. By the 20th minute, organized resistance no longer existed. By the 23rd minute, the battle was over. The surviving Dominion ships fled into faster-than-light travel. The rest remained behind. Burning. Broken. Silent. The tactical display aboard the Resolute Dawn updated one final time. Enemy fleet. 67 warships. Operational. 4. Human fleet. 12 ships. Operational. 12. The bridge remained silent. Nobody cheered. Nobody celebrated. Professional soldiers understood what victory meant. It meant the work wasn't finished yet, because beneath them, an entire world was still dying. Commodore Hale looked down at Viridia Prime. The fires still burned. The cities still suffered. Millions still needed help. He took a slow breath. Then he gave the order that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Recall combat operations. The bridge officers looked toward him. Hale pointed toward the wounded planet below. Let's go save them. The first human transport ships entered Viridia's atmosphere less than 30 minutes after the battle ended. The Talari did not know what to expect. For 9 days they had prepared for extinction. For 9 days they had watched cities burn. For 9 days they had counted losses instead of survivors. Hope had become a dangerous thing. Most of them had stopped allowing themselves to feel it. Deep beneath the ruins of the capital, thousands remained hidden inside emergency shelters. Families sat together in silence. Children slept against exhausted parents. Medical supplies were nearly exhausted. Food reserves were shrinking. Communication networks had collapsed. Everyone waited for the next bombardment. Everyone waited for the end. Then the orbital sensors reported something impossible. The Dominion fleet was gone. At first nobody believed it. The reports were checked. Then checked again. Then verified by independent systems. The answer never changed. The Dominion fleet was gone. The ships now orbiting the planet belonged to someone else. Unknown vessels. Unknown species. Unknown intentions. The shelter commanders exchanged nervous looks. Nobody knew whether this development was good or bad. Then a new transmission arrived. The signal appeared on every functioning communication device across the planet. The translation software struggled for a moment. Then the words appeared. This is the Earth Expeditionary Fleet. A long pause followed. Millions listened. Millions waited. Then the voice continued. The attack is over. Silence. Absolute silence. Across the shelters, cities, bunkers, hospitals, and emergency command centers, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody dared believe what they had heard. The transmission continued. Medical ships are preparing to land. Food shipments are being deployed. Emergency engineering teams are available. Another pause. Then the final sentence. You are safe. The word spread across Viridia faster than any military victory ever could. You are safe. Some people cried. Others simply stared at their screens. Many didn't react at all. The shock was too great. After days of waiting for death, survival felt unreal. Elder Serana received the message inside the primary government shelter. She was one of the highest surviving officials on the planet. Old, tired, exhausted beyond words. She listened to the transmission 3 times. Then she quietly sat down. One of her aides looked concerned. Elder. She didn't answer immediately. Tears slowly formed in her eyes. Not because she was weak. Because she had spent 9 days carrying the responsibility of an entire civilization. And suddenly she no longer carried it alone. Hours later she stood on the surface for the first time since the bombardment began. Smoke still drifted through the ruined streets. Buildings remained shattered. Emergency crews moved through the wreckage. The scars of war were everywhere. Above them, human transports descended through the clouds. Large, gray, unfamiliar. The ships landed in open areas throughout the city. Their ramps lowered. Humans emerged. Not soldiers. Doctors. Engineers. Rescue workers. Construction teams. Humanity had crossed 160 light years carrying enough firepower to destroy fleets. And the first thing they unloaded was medical equipment. That fact spread almost as quickly as the victory itself. Across the city, Talari civilians watched in disbelief. The humans moved without hesitation. Field hospitals appeared within hours. Portable shelters followed. Water purification systems. Emergency power generators. Food distribution centers. The work never stopped. One Talari child watched a human engineer spend 6 straight hours helping rescue workers remove debris from a collapsed school. The engineer never asked who the children were, never asked what reward he would receive. He simply helped. The child would remember that for the rest of his life. A week later, Elder Serana finally met Commodore Nathan Hale. The meeting took place in a damaged government building overlooking the recovering capital. The city was still wounded, but it was alive. That mattered. The two leaders stood together near a broken window. Outside, human and Talari workers rebuilt streets side by side. Serana studied the human commander for a long moment. She had expected arrogance, perhaps pride. After all, his fleet had just defeated one of the most feared military powers in known space. Instead, she found someone reviewing reconstruction schedules. Nothing more. Finally, she asked the question that had haunted her for days. "Why did you come?" Hale looked up. "You asked." The answer confused her. She waited for more. None came. Eventually, she tried again. There was no alliance. No. No treaty. No. No obligation. No. Serana looked genuinely puzzled. Then why? Hale glanced toward the city below. Workers moved through the streets. Rescue drones carried supplies overhead. Children played near temporary shelters. Life continued. The human commander smiled slightly. "Because you needed help." To him, the answer seemed obvious. To her, it felt impossible. Far beyond Viridia Prime, the story spread. At first it traveled through merchant routes, then communication networks, then diplomatic channels. Soon entire sectors of space knew what had happened. The details varied. Stories always changed while traveling. But the important part never changed. A civilization had cried out for help. Humanity had answered. 12 ships had crossed 160 light years. A fleet thought unstoppable had been defeated in 23 minutes. Then the victors stayed behind to rebuild. That was the part everyone remembered. Not the battle. Not the destruction. Not the casualties. The rebuilding. In the outer regions of Dominion-controlled space, subject species quietly shared copies of the battle records. Entire populations watched them. Again. And again. And again. Something unfamiliar began spreading through worlds that had not felt it for generations. Hope. Hope is dangerous. Empires understand that. Fear is predictable. Fear creates obedience. Hope creates questions. Questions create resistance. And resistance changes history. Within the Dominion itself, the consequences appeared quickly. Military planners revised threat assessments. Fleet commanders requested additional resources. Politicians argued. Strategists worried. For 700 years, the Dominion had been certain of its place in the galaxy. Now certainty was gone. In its place remained doubt. And doubt frightened them more than any human warship ever could. Months later, a simple message began appearing throughout dozens of star systems. Nobody knew who created it. Nobody knew where it started. But everyone knew what it meant. The message contained only 2 words. Humanity answers. Merchants whispered it. Refugees repeated it. Oppressed worlds shared it through hidden networks. Entire civilizations memorized it. Humanity answers. For some, the words represented safety. For others, resistance. For many, they represented possibility. Back on Earth, construction had already begun on new warships. Shipyards operated around the clock. Crews trained. Engineers designed improvements. Humanity prepared for the future. Because somewhere in the darkness, another signal would eventually come. Another world. Another civilization. Another desperate voice calling into the void. And when that day arrived, humanity intended to be ready. Because among the stars, a new belief was spreading. Not that humans were the strongest species. Not that they were invincible. Something far more important. If the darkness came for you, if nobody else answered, if all hope seemed lost, humanity might. And increasingly, the galaxy was beginning to realize that could change everything.